And today we're going to be talking about engineering roles at Riot. So today I have three amazing engineers from Riot that have all very different experiences and different life paths to get to these roles. And we're just going to chat a little bit about it. So let's get started. My name is Daniela Piazzi. I am a researcher here at Riot Games in the entertainment department, and I'm your moderator for the session. My brief physical description is that I have brown hair and a ponytail, brown eyes. I'm wearing a black shirt and a black sweater. So let's go around the room and have our panelists introduce themselves. For my panelists, please say your name, your pronouns, a brief physical description for accessibility purposes, and your current title. Pablo, would you like to get us started?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Pablo Solano. My pronouns are he, him. Right now, I've got a Riot Tech hoodie on with Riot Unidos shirt underneath. I have curly hair and blue eyes. And my current title is Associate Software Engineer.
Edgardo?
Hi everyone, I'm Edgardo Llano Sainz. I go by he, him. My brief description is I'm tall, I got black hair, dark brown eyes, wearing a sweater, and I'm currently an engineering manager here at Riot.
I guess that leaves me. My name is Mana. I use he, him pronouns. I am wearing a white sweater. I have shoulder-length dreadlocks that are braided and tied back at the moment.
All righty. Well, can you each briefly tell us your personal journey into the gaming industry, how you started, and how you got to where you are now? Edgardo, would you get us started?
Yeah, sure. So I started my career kind of as a computer science major back in college. My first job was actually not in gaming. It was in advertising tech. I've always loved games. It's something I've been kind of like that far off dream of how do I get into it? Never really knew. So I continued on my software engineering journey at my first job and did that for several years and eventually became an engineering manager. The thing about the type of engineering I do, it's not very relevant to game engineering. So that was not the path for me. But one thing that is transferable is actually engineering management skills are pretty transferable. So once I had transitioned to that role, I started looking at gaming again, and Riot gave me the shot to try to take that skill set into a very different industry that I was previously in. So that's been my journey to get into gaming here. Oh, and I've been at Riot for 6 months now. So, yeah.
Mana?
Yeah, so this is going to be hard to do briefly because there's a lot of steps here, but I did not go to school for engineering. I actually went for philosophy, and I wanted to be an educator at the university level. And to do that, I started teaching at the elementary level to get a master's and progress. One of the things that I've always loved to do is gaming. And in school, while I was studying, I was playing around with computers and just building things for fun. As a teacher, I started building tools for my students to help them learn that were games and using my programming skills. Learned how valuable programming could be to the educational platforms. So I went into coding full time. I worked at a few retail online companies and developed apps there. And had a friend who got a job at Riot, asked if they were accepting resumes, and they were, and here I am. I joined in October, so it's about the same time as Edgardo. And I'm super happy to be here. My current title is software engineer on enterprise tools. Talk a little bit more about that later, I'm sure.
Great. Pablo?
Yeah. So I think my career journey has been the shortest out of the people here. I basically went through school, early school, vaguely aware that I wanted to do something in games, but not really sure how to get there. I then, after basically being a theater kid for all of high school, did a couple week coding program through Google CSSI, which was like for underrepresented groups in computer science. After that, I really fell in love with coding. So I pursued a degree at the college level. And I didn't really like think that gaming was like a career that was attainable, but I always like secretly hoped to do it. So I was like, okay, I'll just do extracurriculars that like are interesting. And then that all happened to be things that like padded a resume for gaming and not much else. So yeah, then after that I cold applied to Riot and here I am. So
Thanks, Pablo. And just for everyone watching, this is a really cool opportunity because everybody here is pretty recent at Riot, like within 6 months. Pablo and I actually started at the same time in the same group where they have this thing called D-noob here at Riot, where you're considered a noob until you're D-noobed for a week, and it's very intense, but it bonded us. But thinking as somebody watching this today, these people have very recent experience of going through that hiring process. So you'll be able to ask questions and they'll be able to recollect quite recently what that was like. Okay, so each of you are engineers in different contexts here at Riot. So what does the word engineer mean to you given your role? And Pablo, I'll throw it back to you to get us started.
sure. So I'm a graphics engineer on the League engine side of things. To me, the word engineer has always like distinguished itself from, I don't know, the other words like coder, because engineering is really about problem solving and also sort of identifying where there's like a need for a solution. I'm an associate, so right now I'm mostly being like handed problems to solve or being asked questions and having a lot of guidance. But at the highest level, what I see engineers doing at Riot is looking through code, being like, oh, that's an opportunity for improvement. We should do that, knowing the right people to talk to. And there's like, I think what separates engineering from a lot of professions, or at least from like a lot of what I expected it to be, was that there's not really a set solution or a right way to do it. It's a lot more creative than I think the public might assume.
And I'm curious because you're saying like engineering at Riot, this is what it looks like. But for your role specifically, what does that look like? And maybe like what the advancement of that role looks like for you.
Right. So what I found at Riot is that an associate engineer has a lot of support. Like the onboarding process has been pretty forgiving. I've gotten the opportunity to look at a lot of different things and see what I'm interested in. I have already played with a lot of different technologies, and it's been less than a year, so I'd say it's been extremely interesting. It's mostly just looking at my level, it's looking at problems with a smaller scope and like with a limited set of other things it affects. But now already towards the end of my first year, I'm starting to touch things that other people are waiting on or that do affect other technologies. So I can sort of feel the responsibility like ramp up. And I think that's part of the plan. So if you're considering applying to Riot, know that it's a pretty good place to start your career, in my opinion.
Great, thank you for sharing. Manna.
So engineering for me, I work on the enterprise tools team, like I said before. Riot is a gaming company. I work more on the company part. I make sure that the business runs well, things like information transfer and payroll. I basically support the business functions that help Riot, to help other teams do what they do. And for me, what engineering looks like has a lot to do with what Pablo said, solving problems. I like to think that if I am working hard, something is going wrong, because my job is to build tools and systems that make my life easier and the people's lives around me easier. I use a lot of web technologies, JavaScript, Python, and at this point in my career, I consider myself more of a systems engineer, where I look at the way that different tools interact and how to make that pipeline smoother, or to make sure that the data is being processed properly across the board, rather than rather than an individual application.
Hmm. Manna, why did you decide to apply for the enterprise section of engineering? What was attractive there, or where did you think that you could uniquely add value?
Yeah, so because my background in engineering was in applications that were customer facing or were business applications, I saw that like there was a nice fit for me to get my foot in the door at Riot. I feel very comfortable working on these problems, whereas the tools that the gaming coders use, I am not as familiar with. But one of the things that I really like about Riot is over time, I will tangentially get some of those experiences and have an opportunity potentially to join a game team later down the line.
Thanks. Edgardo?
Yeah, so what does engineering mean to me? So that's changed quite a bit throughout my career. When I was in IC, I was more traditional backend engineer. So I used to write a lot of code in Python, Ansible, and Terraform. Some of those are more related to like infrastructure. So like people have heard of AWS, worked a lot in there. So a lot of it was just solving technical challenges. And now that I'm more on the management side, it's more about how does my team fit into the organization? How does my team support the goals of my organization? So it's really shifted into a more of a strategic point of view. So a lot of the engineering I do is actually social engineering, understanding how people like Manna and Pablo can like do their best and how do I best support them to achieve their personal goals and how those goals relate to our team. And then in addition to that, while I'm working with these, we've called them individual contributors, so ICs. So as I'm working with them, understanding how that plays into the business side. So that's more of the kind of the social business strategy too. So from my role, I get to still be an engineer and understand kind of the different jargon, solve a lot of technical problems from a different point of view. But a lot of the times what I'm trying to do is unblock people like Pablo and Manna that are trying to do their job and understanding who are the right people to get alignment with so that way they can execute and deliver awesome stuff and a lot of value to our players too. So engineering has sort of shifted for me over time, but I think at the end of the day, I'm still just solving problems.
That's super interesting. I'm curious, like how much of, you know, to be a manager, like how much engineering experience or knowledge do you need, and like how much of like paying your dues do you have to go through to be able to be efficient at your job?
Yeah, so that means different things at different companies. So like engineering manager is kind of a transition role for a lot of people. So I started at a small company. There's 80 total engineers. And so my role was a lot more hands-on coding and providing a lot of kind of larger technical implementations of things. And now I've shifted more into like at a bigger company, my role has completely shifted into like, how do I work with people? How does my team work well within the organization? And so my hands-on coding abilities are not as important, but my ability to have conversations about them are extremely important because I need to make mindful decisions based on the information different people provide to me. And if I can't understand the technical pros and cons of what they're discussing with me, that my decisions will not be as informed and may not be as impactful as I intend them to be.
Yeah. So coming from a different company and having those different experiences of a smaller team and a larger team, what makes searching for roles in engineering at Riot unique to other industries?
Yeah, I think what's pretty unique and what I thought was awesome when I was going through here is the emphasis on values. And when I talk about values, I'm talking about like ways we agree that are appropriate to work together, but it doesn't mean that we all have to have the same background and perspective on them. And so I thought that the process of Riot teaching people about these values, how they integrate them into the interview process, really allows for creating cohesive teams and people that you know are going to approach trying to achieve a similar goal as you are, with bringing their unique perspective and backgrounds. And the way they tie those things together is a very fine line. And I think Riot does a good job balancing that.
Mm. And I have to plus one that for my research position at Riot, there was a big emphasis on the values as well. And as I was prepping for my role at Riot, I spoke to another Rioter who said, like, if like you need to read those values and you need to identify with them, or at least with some of them, because it's not just something that's thrown on the page. It's something that is constantly referred back to when there are really difficult decisions to be made in a room. And oftentimes I'll be in a room and we'll say, well, does this align with player first mentality? Like, is this the best thing that we could do for our players, or is it more for the money, or is it more for something else? And just always going back to our values. So big +1 to that. Pablo, what makes searching for roles in engineering unique to other industries? And did you use any creative ways to find engineering roles along your journey?
Yeah, so I'll start by talking about what was unique about Riot. I mean, I don't have much different to say from Edgardo, but like, I think Riot was pretty unique in that as an associate, when I applied, it felt like they were sort of, they weren't interviewing me for a certain role. And I'm not sure I realized that at first. Like, they were interviewing me as an associate software engineer. And then only after they decided that I was a good candidate did they start looking for a team to place me on. And that was interesting because, you know, I thought like I have to gear my resume towards like every single thing that I'm applying to. But at Riot, it seems like mostly they're just trying to see if you align with the company. And if you do, then they're happy to have you wherever help is needed. In general, I think that it's pretty unique just because there's like a lot of focus on a specific set of companies, but there are a lot of opportunities out there for engineers. Like, I know that there's a lot of emphasis on going out for FANG, and like I remember at my company, or not at my company, at my university, no one else went for or got hired at a gaming company. So I sort of had to like look for my own resources, and the internet was just my friend, where I used like I forget the specific name, but like a video game career map, and just went to like every website's career page and looked to see if there was anything available. And the other company that gave me a job offer besides Riot was a company that I could tell I thought didn't have a lot of applicants. It turned out that they had a healthy amount, but their application was like hidden behind a PDF, behind a URL, behind something on their page, not really on like LinkedIn or any other career website. So I felt like rewarded for going one step further than just like Indeed.com. So I think if you feel like, I don't know, that there's not a role that exists for your skill set, there probably is, and you just got to keep looking.
And as you were going through that process, like you knew you wanted to be in gaming, so like you look specifically at gaming companies?
That's right. And at first I was a little like not sure where to go. It was like, all right, let's go to the Game Awards website. Who's that? All right, let me apply to that company. But yeah, I don't know. I think the main thing I'd do if I could do it all over again is just apply to some companies, because I'd write myself off. And then once you're inside of a place, you realize like, oh wait, all of these are just like qualifications that the candidate doesn't even necessarily need to like meet all of them. It's just like a rough outline of what a recruiter might be looking for in a person. So don't rule yourself out. If you're on the fence, always send it, because the worst outcome is always the same. There's not like a blacklist of candidates who over apply or something like that, you know?
And Pablo, this touches a little bit on something that we were talking about earlier, which is, I think you mentioned that you had taken a boot camp and there was a lot of emphasis on imposter syndrome within the engineering community. I found that really interesting, that is just something that needs to be like so clearly stated, because it is something that this community specifically is constantly dealing with. So what are some of those creative, coping mechanisms that they talked about?
Right, good question. I think that one of the main ways, honestly, that you can deal with it, or that the industry can deal with it, is just mentioning it because as long as like we keep remembering that it's real, it'll make it easier to deal with. As long as you know that even like the most senior engineers that I've worked with at Riot also have imposter syndrome and will like call themselves stupid, is reassuring. Um, I it's just helpful to know that everyone has imposter syndrome, and that like if you think someone doesn't, they're probably just doing a good job at hiding it, because imposter syndrome makes people feel like they have to sometimes. Um, so yeah, don't feel alone if that's something you struggle with.
So vulnerable and transparent with us. I appreciate it, Pablo.
Of course.
Now, what are some creative job searching tools that you may have used along your journey?
I'm sorry, you cut out. Was that directed toward me?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I just want to plus one like everything that was said so far. So I think the interesting thing for me that relates to this question is that I was working in tech, but in a very different type of tech, not gaming at all. And it was on kind of a whim that I applied to Riot, mostly because I never thought I would get hired. And I think that imposter syndrome comes from a lot of misconceptions that people have, that everybody knows more than them, that they just aren't good enough, they'll never learn it. Engineering, everything is completely open book. Your knowledge is so much less important than your ability to ask good questions and find the information, rather than memorizing. Syntax is just syntax. What you need to do, or like once you develop that muscle of finding out information, literally Googling, you set yourself up for success. And that's also true for the for looking for opportunities. When I started my career in tech, I did a lot of meetups, looking for opportunities just to interact with engineers or people in the tech industry on a somewhat social level, hearing what they're working on, tailoring my practice projects to kind of develop the muscles that they were talking about. I think that if you, similar to this conversation, people will be happy to tell you what they're doing and happy to point you to resources that they are using or they have used. And a lot of times those are either low or zero cost, and you can kind of follow in those footsteps. So in addition to scouring the internet and like applying to a lot of jobs, I would try and go out as much as possible and meet people who are working in the industries. LinkedIn is really great. Like, send people a message on LinkedIn, and you'd be surprised how often people respond.
And I'm curious to hear about these practice projects and like anything else that you recommend people do to prepare themselves for the interview process.
Yeah, as a former hiring manager, the most impressive thing I've seen are what people have done. I like to use the example, if I wanted to have somebody bake a cake for me, and one baker gave me a piece of paper and the other baker gave me a donut, I'd be much more interested in the baker that bring me a donut. You have the tools to create engineering projects, whether it's a personal website, whether it's some sort of app that solves a need. I am working with a student he's a personal trainer. He built an app to schedule his clients. The resources are available for you to kind of create these things. It's really awesome if there's something you are solving a problem. Maybe it's a shopping list for a parent or something like that. And the way you kind of approach that problem in your process is super valuable in learning about you as a potential engineer and employee. So the biggest thing you can do in starting your career, like literally day one, the first thing I did at coding boot camp was to make a card game. Is get started writing projects, just practicing those skills, and looking for opportunities to show people what you know and what you can do.
Yeah. I remember what we had spoken, you told me that Riot has a very specific way, and like for engineering jobs in general, there's this tech interview portion of it that I'm not familiar with in my field. What is the best way to prepare for that? Or are there any specific tools?
Yeah, absolutely. So the tech interview is very different from the projects. Projects are things that are very similar to the job itself. Tech interviews are not necessary or an assessment of your skills. And like I said, like everything is open book. It's, don't think of it as like I need to memorize a bunch of stuff, but there will be like a technical question. You know, how do you parse a string, or, you know, if given some input, can you give that some output? And these can be very intimidating. They are usually timed. You are sitting there with another engineer who in your mind, you know, they know everything. So they're going to catch all your mistakes. And the best way to get ready for these interviews is to practice, practice, practice. I like the site LeetCode. It is a site that gives you a lot of examples of these types of problems. And also they'll give you the solution. So while you're practicing, you know, you don't beat yourself up if you struggle. You look at the solution, try and implement it, and you'll find that there are certain types of problems. I'm not going to go into the different types right now, but there are categories of problems. And once you develop the skills to solve a category of problem, the next time you see that type of problem, it'll be that much easier for you. So don't be afraid, so practice, and don't get discouraged when things get frustrating. You'll find that when you do repeated practice, it starts to become second nature, and you'll be able to identify what you're supposed to do much earlier, which will make the process smoother.
Edgardo, I'm curious, have you facilitated any of these tech interviews in the past?
Yes, I have several times.
What are some things that make people stand out, or some common mistakes that you may see that people can prepare for or avoid?
Yeah, so these are always run slightly differently. So one thing to note, though, is that most of the time it's an open conversation. So what I'm trying to do when I'm running a tech interview is identify, and we're talking about people trying to get into the industry, so we'll start with like more juniors. I want to make sure someone's teachable. So I need to make sure that you're asking questions that are clarifying what I'm actually asking you to do. That's the most important thing, and the first thing you should always do. The second thing is, as you're solving problems, kind of like a traditional math class, you always want to show your work. So talk about how you're solving a problem. Talk about what things you're taking into consideration as you're solving a problem. And third, you know, you could always bounce an idea back with your interviewer. They all have different rule sets. Some will say, no, I can't give you any hint, tip, nothing. Some will engage in conversation with you because they're interested about what you think about certain approaches. And all of these little conversations give you opportunities to show up different skills and knowledge bits you have. So take advantage, because you also have you usually have 45 minutes to an hour to answer the prompt. And then the last one is the most difficult to do in the interview, and that's execute and get the answer. And to Mana's point, you really just have to practice to get those down. I've certainly have participated in some where I looked at the question and I had no idea. Was kind of stuck and frozen, and I left demoralized, to be honest. And the truth was that I knew at the end of the day, I just needed to practice more. So if you encounter yourself, sometimes you'll get a prompt that's just super difficult. And that company may not have the best interview practices. So it may not be a problem about you or your skill set. It could have just been a bad fit. So whatever the results are from a technical interview, I know they were kind of one of my biggest demoralizers going through interviews, trying to get my first job. You know, brush it off, because the next interview you do, they're not going to remember how you did at, you know, company X, Y, or Z in the past. It's all going to be about how you do in this moment. So each moment is a fresh start with these. And that's all I can say is, like, always try to give your best on each individual one, because they're not talking with each other and the companies aren't talking with each other.
And Edgardo, is it critical for them to get it right? Because you were saying that you're looking for somebody that's teachable. If everything else is there, but they get the answer wrong, is that can you not move forward with that candidate?
Yeah, so that's why I emphasize the first two parts about communicating, like how you think and how you approach problems, how you receive feedback. Because let's say that you got 98% of the way to solving the problem. It may be that that particular team just needs someone that they can mold into doing the job and doesn't need someone who can answer the question right away. There are situations where there are leeway, and their talking points about, hey, this candidate I really want to vouch for because of XYZ is going to be how the strength you displayed in receiving feedback and asking questions and holding a conversation, understanding the problem. And if you don't show off any of those skills, then it's really going to come down to, did you solve the problem? So it's a yes and a no, and it's always going to be team dependent. But yeah.
And besides a tech interview specifically, what are skills or characteristics that help a candidate stand out to you?
Yeah, so I mentioned that a lot of people we're just trying to solve problems, and a lot of that comes down to communication, being able to understand who you're solving a problem for, understanding what the actual problem is, understanding what value you can deliver. All of these are conversations you have to have in your day-to-day job. So being able to talk to your interviewer like a regular person, get to know them, understand what they're asking of you, and answering a question that displays that you listened is going to show really positive indicators that we could work well together. So if we're not focused on technical skills, communication is probably one of the top ones I'll be looking at as a hiring manager.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Pablo, you did something which was pretty unique, which was you got a job at Riot straight out of college. How much of your work from school is applicable to your job, and how much have you had to learn here at Riot?
Right. Honestly, most of it has been applicable in some way. Um, I don't think there are any classes I really regret. Obviously, some classes were more directly applicable than others, like most of the CS curriculum, um, computer graphics, computer animation, um, game design, etc. Uh, but then some of the other classes that I took that like I'm kind of still surprised were relevant. Like I said, I sort of in high school I was a theater kid and took some theater classes in college. One of those was stage lighting. Now when we're doing a bunch of lighting improvements in the League engine, I'm still hearing concepts that came up way back when. So I'm like surprised that, humanities represent once again. Uh I think my like internships, while they weren't super sexy, as some people might say, were like useful and definitely prepared me for my interviews and my job here at Riot. Specifically, like I went to small liberal arts school, so there weren't a lot of like big game design opportunities there, but like I worked on a game for a nonprofit with a professor who had like whose wife worked there. And then separately, I did a University of Wyoming internship because someone went there after graduating from my CS department, and they had a VR XR like research lab. So I didn't do anything like official with another game company, but I made sure that the experience I was getting could be related maybe in some way, or at the very least was interesting to me. And then I think things sort of connected themselves naturally, and I was always able to find at least something that felt relevant to my job out of all of those.
Hmm. I'm curious, in college, are there any additional classes that you wish you took or didn't realize would, be so beneficial?
Um, Not necessarily. I mean, I think that's the one of the great things about video game development is like the industry is so big. If you just take classes in the things that you like there'll be a role for you in this industry. It's better to do that than to like study things that you think would get you a cool job and then only find out once you start it like, wait, this is exactly like the class and I didn't like the class. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
you know so I know it sounds like easy to say as someone who already has the job, but like just take classes and things that you're interested in, do extracurriculars and things that you're interested in, and I think that the passion will shine through when you're applying to places.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And especially because as we see today, there is so much breadth in this field. There are so many areas you can go into, and it can look very different job to job. Thank you. Manna, you have told us how you come from this non-traditional background into software engineering. You wanted to be a teacher and you studied philosophy. For those who don't have like this college tech background, how do you recommend they get started?
Yeah, I am happy to say that like, there is no paper ceiling. You don't necessarily need a degree. You don't need a degree to get into technology, to work at Riot. It's funny, when I was a teacher, like literally everybody would talk about the school that they went to and like try and impress people with their academic credentials. Here on my team, I work with brilliant people. I have no idea who even went to college. Um, so don't let your previous education or lack thereof deter or set the bar for you. School is not education; they are not the same thing. I think that, because this goes back to what Pablo was talking about, doing things that you really enjoy will help set you up to do things that you enjoy professionally. This goes back to what we were talking about with projects. I did a lot of independent. I did a lot of independent game development. And not only did it help prepare me for coding in general for working at Riot, but it also showed me what I do and do like about the industry, and where potentially I want my career to go. So the most important thing you can do is really define success for yourself. What do you want to do? Where would you like to take your career? And the only way you're going to do that is by doing a little bit of exploration, either in the educational setting or independently. That is going to help prepare you potentially for that next step.
Well, is there anything anybody would like to add that we haven't talked about that you think would be really beneficial to this group to hear before we moved into Q&As?
I just wanted to add one point about the technical interviews. An important thing to know right now is that sometimes these questions are intentionally ambiguous, and the recruiter, and I've been in this situation myself, is looking for how you get information that wasn't provided. So how you talk about the question before you even like write a line of code is super important. Just wanted to add that part.
Yeah, tell us, what was your technical interview like, since it was pretty recent?
Yeah, so Riot has a long interview process, which is great because you get to meet a lot of people. Other people on the panel have talked about like you're interviewing for, in the beginning you're interviewing for Riot, and then they try and figure out what team you fit on. But usually it starts off with a few conversations, which are very low stakes. You start to get into some technical conversations around how you would approach a system, or these are the types of errors that we're seeing. How would you start to debug it? And that's not with like a keyboard. You're having conversations around your process. Then you do a series of challenges. They are usually some sort of data structure, taking an array and, sort it or do something, manipulate it in some way. And then there is a more systems conversation where you start to talk about, and again, what I do in engineering might not be what everybody else does, but you start to talk about data systems and servers and how you allocate memory, and the great thing about this is like, this is a solved problem. If you look this up and study this and like learn it, you can kind of regurgitate it based on the different parameters that people have, the different limitations. So if any of that is intimidating, it shouldn't be, because like the great thing is you can find the answer to these questions. In interviews, sometimes people will literally ask you something like, how does the internet work? Which sounds like a big, scary question, but, and it is, because it's super complicated, but like, it's something that you can Google and like have that answer prepared. So this goes back to that preparation part. I was talking about my interview process, but that like it's a series of A, getting to know you, B, how does your thinking align with the problem space? And then like going back to something that everybody on the panel was talking about, values are super important. We want to know that you are going to be a value add. You're going to help Riot be better for its game or for the players and for your fellow riders.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to quickly ask Edgardo something, which was, you had talked about that in the interview process, there are different interviewers who will give certain amount of information. What are like questions that you think are like green flags versus red flags? Like you're not gonna say anything about that, but like there are questions that, there's some leeway and certain interviewers will walk you through things.
One clarification, are you asking about questions an interviewer or interviewee can ask an interviewer, or
Yeah.
So I think questions about the team, the problem space you'll work in, all those are fair. The gray area questions, which have become really popular nowadays that I want to point out, is like asking directly about salary or things like that, are not the best in your first interview. And the reason I say that isn't because it's a taboo topic, it's because we're trying to understand what your interest is in working here. And if the interest is purely monetary, then it may not be a fit for this particular company. And I've worked at other places where if you ask that, it's an extremely red flag for us and other people that have no problems. And that's why I list it as a gray area, because it's very individual, interviewer specific. So anything about how you will be compensated, maybe wait until you've gotten the offer, because then all of those questions are completely free to ask, and you definitely should be asking as you've kind of fulfilled the requirements and you're now a candidate to accept this role.
And
that's probably the main
specifically,
one.
like in the tech interview, is there anything that you can, like, for example, in my tech interview, I asked so many questions, but I can imagine if you don't know if you're allowed to ask those questions, you won't ask them and you're missing out on really valuable pieces.
Oh, the tech interview? No, everything's fair game. And if it's not, the interviewer will tell you and say, sorry, I can't answer. And then that's it. There's no penalizing component after that.
Awesome. That's great now. Okay, gonna move into some Q&As. Are there any last things that you all wanna mention before we move in?
Excited to hear the questions.
All right. So we have a question from Maggie H. She asks, what sort of professional development opportunities have you been able to experience during your time at Riot, specifically as engineers?
I could start us off. So there are different game engines that exist. Riot has its own proprietary engines, but also for a lot of R&D, we use a system called Unreal. And Unreal, they offer a class to learn Unreal, which you could take through. I believe it's I'm going to fumble the name of the program that allows you to do it, but yeah, they pay for you to take this Unreal class. So that is a very specific career building tool that Riot offers. Yeah, I'm a Unity person, so Unreal is like a different beast. But since we use it here, that's what I gotta learn.
Great. Anything else of how Riot helped you develop as an engineer? Anybody can jump in.
Yeah, sure. So as I kind of previously mentioned, I don't come from gaming. And so that's definitely a challenge when trying to lead a team on like how to do well in this space. And so one thing my manager did for me is give me time to develop. So one thing I really appreciate is there's a very forgiving onboarding process here at Riot that gives you the time, the resources to figure out what you need to do your job well. So it's something that removed a lot of the initial pressures when starting a new job. And yeah, very grateful for it. So
yeah, essentially your job at first is just to learn and to understand what the heck Riot even does and what everything that they touch, because it is quite a lot.
Yeah.
Pablo, anything you'd like to add?
I want to have time for all the questions, so I think they covered it.
So I have a question from Irvin Ramos. One thing I'm interested in is the hybridization between design and engineering in technical design. Has Riot moved towards featuring this idea more in their team structures? And if so, what do you look for specifically for these roles?
Yeah, so on my team, we actually have what are called technical artists. And so these are people that know how to use artist tools like Maya. So, creating animations, but also can dive into code to figure out how do we export the animation I created and make sure that the game engine can run it. So it's a very much a hybrid level skill set. There are special programs that are out there that you can take to kind of identify. But I know a lot of the people I work with have kind of a non-traditional route, which is like they had one of the sides, so either engineering or the artist skill set. And then as they were on the job, they took on projects in problem spaces that covered the other side and slowly built up this hybrid skill set of being a technical artist. Yeah.
Very, and is that something that they can express in their interview process already?
100%, because a lot of people get into games and they want to make fun, right? They want to be a game designer, which is not an engineering role. But you know what? A lot of the artist roles benefit from having a technical understanding of how their tooling works, because then they understand the limitations. So having an interest in multiple disciplines is never seen as a negative. It's always seen as like, well, how can we leverage that to prompt your growth and grow you in a way that's interesting to you? So it more sets the direction of like, where at what projects I may associate you with versus like others. Yeah.
Hey, Samuel Han asks, what would your advice and recommendations be for people with non-traditional software engineers or beginning engineers to pursue a career in software engineering at any company or at Riot?
Yeah, I'll feel that. I think that the thing that you need to do is to become a software engineer. And what I mean is you have to start developing software. Even coming through a traditional school program, it doesn't necessarily set you apart as a candidate. It is your abilities like to do the work that really matters. There's no magic spell that or thing that automatically is going to get you in the door. I will say, Riot is a great place to work. It is a very challenging interview, and like there are a lot of people who apply here, but it's not like we put all people who have CS degrees in one bucket and everyone else. It really is about what you have done previous and how you present yourself that will allow you to work at any company, but specifically Riot.
Does anyone else want to add?
Yeah, I just want to be an advocate for the coding boot camps. I think they're a phenomenal resource, one that several members of my family have done and eventually got jobs through. One was actually also a philosophy major back in school that decided to take a boot camp. One say I will say that the journey through boot camp is a little different from everyone, but the one thing that all my family members had in line were these personal projects that kept them going. Some found a job within the first couple months of completing a boot camp. Another one, it took a year, but it was the perseverance to keep applying, to keep working on their skill set that eventually got them through the door. And they're a candidate for more jobs, but that first one is going to be tough. Just be open that your timeline may differ.
How do you find the boot camp that is right for you? Because I know that there are like horror stories of the wrong type of boot camps or scam boot camps. How do you figure out which one is a good boot camp and one that fits you as a human being?
So I think there are a few considerations. One is how successful that boot camp is at supporting people to get jobs. Another one is financial support. A lot of people can't just take on a boot camp and hold down a job. It's a lot. So some different boot camps offer different financial models, from taking a portion of your first year salary to scholarship programs to all sorts of things. So understanding how they support you in that factor. And then 3 is the skill set they're building. There's many different types of engineering. Make sure that the boot camp that you apply to is building a skill set of things you actually want to do. If you want to build websites, make sure it's tailored towards building websites. If it's towards being a data engineer, focus on that.
Okay.
I will say also that with boot camps, even more so than with traditional education, a lot of it is you get out what you put in. And in boot camps, you don't have the same level of accountability. So it's up to you to stay motivated, to stay on top of the work, make sure that you are, I would say, go above and beyond as much as possible. And that is on the student to make sure that they're doing that.
I'm going to ask one more question, and nobody run away after, because we're going to be sharing some open positions at Riot, and also all of these great people's LinkedIn QR codes, so that if you want to connect with them after, they've all said that they are open to fielding any questions, any additional ones. This one I think is for Mana. In terms of the interview process, I remember that Mana mentioned both the tech interview and personal projects being part of being a well-rounded candidate. In your opinion, which one should we put more time into while getting ready to apply to places?
Mileage may vary. It's going to differ depending on the candidate. The one thing I will say about the personal projects is you are doing the technical work. You are understanding the syntax. You are, learning how the code works and how things interact. The preparing for technical interviews it's like a skill in and of itself. So, I can't say a percentage for either one. I will say that you will absolutely have to, without a doubt, prepare for the technical interview. You could theoretically get in the door without having a personal project. I look at the personal project really heavily, and I think that that's a great way for people to understand themselves and to showcase what they can do. But yeah, I couldn't put a percentage either way.
Any other thoughts before we close from Pablo or Edgardo or Mana?
I think on that one, I probably say the personal project, just because it both pads your resume, which is important. I mean, as a cold application, I really believe in the value of a good resume. And you also gain the knowledge from that. So at Riot Games and other game studios that I've interviewed with, they usually ask a couple questions about game design, or how would you do XYZ. It's stuff that you wouldn't really get just by grinding leak code, because they want to make sure that you've thought about the code, thought about design, and thought about I don't know, the sort of things that go into what you're actually doing. They want to make sure that you're a well-rounded candidate, I suppose. Whereas with the grinding leak code side of things, not only would you maybe go on autopilot if you don't balance it out with some personal projects, but I remember in the leak code portion of my Riot Games interview, I straight up wrote a bug in my code. What was important is that after that, I basically came in and was like, hey, I wrote a bug. HackerRank didn't catch it, but I did. And I want to explain why that happened and how I do it better. And I think they liked that, because I moved on to the next round. So I don't think my technical interview portion was perfect at all, but just more how you talk about it. I think that's really important. And also the ability to think about code, which you only get by doing a lot of coding, not by doing question after question on one of these sites that sort of draw you.
Great, thank you. Edgardo?
Yeah, sure. So I know my path was a little different than the rest of y'all. I have 0 personal projects. And that is okay. I struggled through the leak code stuff. I'd say that there isn't really a wrong way to approach it. It's just the one that you'll feel motivated to do. is the exercise you should go through, because what really matters here is the perseverance and persistence of like trying to hone down your skills. So whether it's solving the leak code problems or the personal project, whatever brings out the passion in you, the motivation, I'd say that that's where I'd focus.
And the passion will shine through in the interview. It's just-
Exactly.
I'm going to quickly share my screen. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong thing. A tab. Oh, well, let me share a tab.
Wait, do we have time for Sebastian's question? Because I think it's a really good one.
If you want, while I figure this out, would you like to?
Absolutely. I'll start and then please join in. It looks like Sebastian's asking about languages. It seems like they have been doing C# and they see C++ as a requirement. Languages, coding, languages, or your study should be in a language you're familiar with and should relate to the job you want. But it is not a end of story if you have been studying, say, C# and the job is C++. You should be, once you get good at coding, you should be able to kind of transition, especially when the languages are similar in their function, rather like not necessarily in their syntax. Syntax is like where the semicolons go, how you pass arguments into functions, things like that. That is going to be language specific, and you can pick it up relatively quickly. But the concepts of coding are really what you should be focusing on. So don't be discouraged if you haven't used a language extensively.
Yeah, like I said earlier, just apply. Like, I think even if the language on the job posting is very specific and they're like, we want someone with professional experience in this, recruiters are just people. Oftentimes what they mean is we want someone who knows how to use C++. So if like you're confident that you've taught yourself how to use C++, then like, why not apply? You're qualified, and they could use you.
Does everybody see Riot Games slideshow? Great. Okay, so these are current open roles we have in software engineering. If you're interested in any of these, please send an email to the email account that you see here on screen. Victoria is amazing, and she will make sure to flag you specifically for these roles to the recruiters because you participated in this panel. So I'll leave this on for a second. You can screenshot this.
We should have talked a little bit about leveling and what the different titles mean.
I don't think we have time anymore,
I
sadly.
know.
And then next, here are everybody's LinkedIn. So if you are curious about leveling, send Anna a LinkedIn message, and he can get to you. So thank you so much to everyone for participating. This was a great conversation. Edgardo, Pablo, Mana, thank you so much for your kindness and for allowing us to hear about your journeys and all of your amazing advice.